shadow of the Imaku, the necropolis of Saqqara. 2600 BCE, the nascent years of the Old Kingdom. The air is thick with the dust of freshly carved limestone, the dry, hot breath of the Libyan desert, and the acrid smoke of natron being burned for purification. This is the age of pyramids, a time when mortals touch the sky, and Pharaoh Djedefre, son of the legendary Khufu, lay in state, his colossal monument yet unfinished. The central figure in this mortal drama is Iri, the Imaku, the favored one, and overseer of the royal works. He is the chief architect, a man whose hands drew the plans that the gods themselves might envy. But Iri's heart holds a blueprint far darker than any mastaba. Iri is standing not in the light of day, but deep within the subterranean, granite-lined burial chamber, a tomb meant to keep a god-king whole for eternity. A small, carefully concealed oil lamp, fueled by the purest sesame oil, casts long, serpentine shadows. The chamber is cold, a sudden, unnatural chill that hints at the presence of forces from beyond the duat. The body of Djedefre, wrapped tightly in linen and anointed with unguents of myrrh and cinnamon, rests on a slab of alabaster. Before him stands Iri, no longer the humble servant, but a corrupt hierophant. He wears the white linen kilt of a mortuary priest and the jackal mask of Anubis, though the deity of embalming would disown this disciple. His hands do not hold the implements of preservation, but the terrifying tools of reanimation, the adze, the sickle, the libation bowl. The ritual is the opening of the mouth, WPJR. It is the final, most sacred rite, intended to reanimate the corpse, to restore the five senses, to allow the Ba, soul to travel, and the Ka, life force essence, to reside again in the perfect vessel. Iri begins the chant, his voice deep and resonant, mimicking the cadence of the high priest. Thy bread is for thee, thy beer is for thee, thy water is for thee, thy mouth is opened for thee by Horus. But as he brings the ritual adze, tipped with meteoric iron toward the mouth, the words twist. They become an appeal not to Horus, but to Set, the chaotic, devouring god of the storm. I am not the servant, but the master of this rite. I summon the Ak, the glorious spirit, from the celestial waters, not to free it, but to bind it. O great Ka of Djedefre, the essence of the sun, the divine life force that powered the very pyramids. Iri, the Imaku, claims you now. I take the divine sustenance for myself. I will be Pharaoh of the spirit. He strikes, not the mouth, but the sacred place above the heart, where the Ib, heart-soul, resides, using the adze to sever the final celestial cord tethering the Ka to the vessel. He opens the mouth not to free the spirit, but to consume it. With a terrible, silent, inward gasp, the invisible, divine, golden light that is the Pharaoh's Ka rushes out and into Iri, settling deep within his own Ib. The chill deepens. Iri feels a surge of unholy power, a terrifying, absolute clarity. The light in the chamber dims and he knows. The Ka of Djedefre is his. The taste of divinity, the subterranean chamber, Saqqara necropolis, the moment immediately following the ritual. The moment the Ka of Djedefre entered Iri, the architect felt the true, staggering weight of what it meant to be Pharaoh. It was not merely authority, it was cosmic resonance, the power of millions of working hands, the divine protection of the Neteru, gods, the memory of all previous kings, the very force that held Ma'at, cosmic order, against Isfet, chaos. It flooded his mortal shell, his mortal heart, his Ib, now beat with the rhythm of the sun god, Ra. Iri staggered back from the alabaster slab, dropping the ritual adze. The mask of Anubis clattered to the stone floor. He was breathing heavily, his vision sharpened. The darkness of the chamber pushed back not by the lamp, but by the internal radiance. He could feel the weight of the immense stone pyramid blocks above him. He could sense the geological stresses in the rock layers beneath the desert floor. He was an architect who had just internalized the principle of creation itself. The danger, however, was immediate and physical. The stolen Ka was too vast for a mortal vessel. Iri's veins felt as though molten electrum ran through them. He needed a conduit, a permanent anchor for this illicit divinity, or the power would consume him, exploding his body into dust. He had foreseen this. The final architectural flourish he had reserved for Jedefre's chamber was a small, unassuming Ka statue, sculpted not from precious wood or gold, but from a dense block of polished black granite, known for its ability to hold and channel energies. It was a secondary vessel, placed innocently in a recess. This statue, which Irie had secretly imbued with esoteric hieroglyphs of binding rather than release, was meant to be the failsafe. It was the backup destination for the Ka. Irie rushed toward the recess, his mind racing with the speed of light, his limbs moving with unnatural, seismic force. He placed his hands, now radiating with the golden light of the stolen Ka, onto the statue's granite shoulders. "Be my prison, my perfect body, my eternal fortress," he commanded, not in the low chant of a priest, but in the voice of a thunderous god. He poured the excess divine energy, the crushing weight of Jedefre's essence, into the statue. The cold black granite warmed, then began to hum. Tiny fractures of light, like miniature lightning strikes, spiderwebbed across the surface before vanishing, absorbed by the stone. The statue was now fully charged, a silent, powerful repository of stolen kingship. Having safely externalized the excess power, Irie felt a strange, sublime calm settle over him. He had taken only the necessary portion, the seed of the divine Ka, enough to grant him unimaginable lifespan, influence, and the protection of a god king, without destroying his body. He retrieved the Ka statue and concealed it within the folds of his large linen robe. The mummified body of Jedefre remained on the slab, intact, perfect, but hollowed out. The opening of the mouth ritual had been completed flawlessly in the eyes of any observer. The Ba was free to wander, but the Ka that should have waited for its return was gone. Irie rearranged the ritual tools, wiped the traces of his oil lamp, and donned the mask of Anubis again, just in case. He emerged from the tomb, not as a mortuary priest, but as a man who carried a god in his chest and a pharaoh in his arms. The desert sun rose, casting shadows across the nascent pyramid complex, a colossal memorial to a king who was now nothing more than an empty shell. The empty vessel and the full throne. The court of Memphis, a decade after Jedefre's burial. The fifth dynasty begins. Irie, the Amaku and master architect, did not attempt to claim the throne directly. He was a vessel, not the king himself, and the political reality of the Old Kingdom was too ruthless for a sudden, unexplained ascension. Instead, he chose the role of the eternal power behind the throne. The divine Ka within him granted not only vigor, but terrifying, subtle persuasion. When he spoke, his words carried the divine authority of kingship. Jedefre's successor, Khafre, who completed the Great Second Pyramid, found Irie indispensable. When Khafre's son, Menkore, took power, he relied on Irie even more deeply. Decades passed. The generations of pharaohs aged, ruled, and died. But Irie, the architect, seemed immutable. His face remained unlined. His eyes held the keen, perpetual sharpness of a man in his prime, his authority growing into a monolithic presence in the royal court of Memphis. The stolen Ka served as a silent, invisible Sed festival, perpetually renewing his vitality. The problems, however, began not in Irai's life, but in the afterlife of Jedefre. The mortuary cult dedicated to Jedefre, the body of priests responsible for his eternal maintenance, began to report strange, unsettling phenomena. The offerings of meat, beer, and bread, laid out daily in the offering chapel, would spoil almost instantly. The scent of purification incense would turn foul. Worst of all, the Ba of Jedefre, which should have been returning nightly to its body, was restless. The Ba, the soul that traveled, was unable to settle because its anchoring Ka, the divine essence, was absent. The high priest of Jedefre's mortuary complex, Neferkare, a man known for his dedication to Ma'at, was deeply troubled. He noticed that the divine resonance he felt when entering the burial chamber of Khafre or Menkare was utterly absent in Jedefre's tomb. Jedefre's chamber felt cold, silent, and wrong, like a heart that had stopped beating. Neferkare performed a ritual divination using consecrated water in a bronze bowl, seeking the guidance of Thoth, the god of wisdom and reckoning. The reflection in the water was not the expected image of the king, moving gracefully in the field of reeds, but a distorted, flickering shadow, attempting to reach for something forever out of grasp. It was the shade of Jedefre, perpetually denied his resurrection. Driven by fear and duty, Neferkari approached the only constant in the three ruling generations, Iri, the chief architect. He presented his findings in the grand hall of the Palace of the White Wall. Iri listened, his face impassive, his eyes betraying nothing of the divine fire within. "It is the way of the Duat, High Priest," Iri said, his voice calm but possessing a frightening finality. "Perhaps the offerings are impure. The king's journey is arduous. Do not disturb the royal peace with the superstitions of spoiled bread." But as Neferkari bowed and retreated, Iri felt a sudden, profound shift. The immense granite statue he kept concealed deep within his own estate, the overflow vessel, emitted a psychic screech. The Ba of Jedefre, realizing its Ka was anchored to a new living body, was now actively hunting its own life force. The soul of the dead pharaoh was a predator, and Iri, the architect, was its prey. The best vengeance Iri's private estate, Memphis, the dead of night 50 years after the burial of Jedefre. Iri had always relied on the sheer protective force of the stolen Ka to shield him. A Ka was divine essence. A Ba was merely a traveling soul. But the Bay of a pharaoh, especially one perpetually denied its eternal union, was a force of immense, concentrated rage. It was pure spirit, capable of slipping through the cracks of the mortal world. That night, the attacks began. Iri was accustomed to the rich comfort of his chambers, cedar wood, polished limestone, and silks from Punt. But the air around him now tasted of dry earth and natron, the smells of the tomb. He sat bolt upright in his bed, the golden Ka within him flaring defensively. He could feel an oppressive, heavy pressure descending from the roof, a crushing spiritual weight. A shadow detached itself from the wall, twisting into the form of a magnificent human-headed hawk. It was Jedefre's Ba. Its eyes, usually benign and curious, were now burning holes of ethereal malice. The Ka within Iri felt like a beacon, drawing the angry spirit directly toward him. The Ba did not use physical force. It attacked with the instruments of the afterlife. It tried to smother Iri with spiritual exhaustion, whispering promises of eternal rest that were merely thinly veiled threats of annihilation. The air grew impossibly cold, and the architect's lungs refused to draw breath, not because of earthly suffocation, but because the Ba was attempting to stop the breath of life itself, the Ankh that was supplied by the Ka. Iri fought back, channeling the stolen power. He projected the sheer authority of kingship outward, yelling, "I am Mayat. I am the Order of the Sun. Back, shade, back to your casket." The force of the shout, amplified by the divine Ka, slammed against the Ba like a physical wall. The hawk form shrieked, a sound that shook the foundation stones of the house and dissipated, reforming only moments later into an oppressive miasma of dread. The Ba, cunning in its desperation, changed tactics. It did not aim for Iri's body, but for the anchor he had created, the black granite Ka statue, which lay concealed in a deep chest in the adjoining room. The Ba flowed through the wall like water through papyrus, descending upon the chest. It began to strike the granite with relentless, invisible force, chipping away at the subtle, binding hieroglyphs Iri had engraved. Tink, tink, tink. Iri burst into the room, his eyes blazing, recognizing the mortal danger. If the Bia successfully damaged the vessel, the massive amount of Ka energy stored within would be released chaotically, likely shattering Iri's own body and leaving the architect as a desiccated husk. He leaped between the chest and the unseen spirit, thrusting his hands forward. The Ka statue was his weakness, his anchor, and his life insurance. By the divine hand that shaped the cosmos and the divine heart that beats in my breast, I command you, Ba of Jedefre, to desist. You cannot break what is already bound by the essence of your own kingship. Iri poured all his conscious will in a searing torrent of the Ka's energy into the chest, enveloping it in a golden spiritual fire. The Ba recoiled instantly, burning as if touched by the sun god himself. and fled through the keyhole, disappearing into the pre-dawn air. Eerie collapsed, sweating, his heart pounding. The experience proved two things. The stolen Ka gave him immense power and longevity, but it also made him the target of an eternally vengeful dead king. To survive, Irie would have to find a way to silence the Bay of Jedefre forever, or find a deeper, unassailable hiding place for his prize. The architect's last design, the limestone quarries of Tura, 70 years after the burial, the reign of Pharaoh Unas. The Old Kingdom was showing its first cracks. The power of the local nomarchs was rising, and the divine authority of the pharaohs was beginning to wane, a subtle descent that Irie, bearing the purloined Ka, was acutely aware of. He knew his secret depended on the belief in absolute eternal kingship. If the structure of Egyptian belief crumbled, his spiritual fortress might crumble with it. For decades, Irie had studied the most arcane funerary texts, seeking a final, permanent solution. The Ba of Jedefre was persistent, attacking every few years, always searching, always trying to reclaim its essence. Irie had realized he couldn't simply destroy the Ba. It was part of the divine cycle. He needed to trap it. His long-sought answer lay in the newest development in mortuary architecture, the pyramid texts. Pharaoh Unas, the current ruler, was the first to carve these complex spells into the walls of his subterranean chamber. These texts were not mere decoration. They were power conduits, guides, and protective shields for the king's journey. Irie, still the chief architect, was overseeing the installation of these texts. This was his opportunity. He commissioned a special deep shaft to be dug beneath the royal workshops in the Tura quarries, far from the central necropolis. He claimed it was for storing a secret reserve of perfect white limestone, but it was to be his second tomb, his ultimate hiding place. In this deep, cool, man-made cavern, he began his most complex, blasphemous architectural design. Using the Ka statue as his focal point, he designed a ritual circle drawn from the most potent spells of the pyramid texts, twisting their meaning from preservation to imprisonment. He used spells meant to propel the king into the celestial north, spells that invoke Nut, the sky goddess, and the imperishable stars, but redirected their energy inward, creating a vortex of cosmic binding. He stood in the center of the crude, chalk-drawn circle, holding the heavy black granite statue. The Bay of Jedefre, sensing the approaching finality, arrived immediately, manifesting as a furious, swirling gale of hot wind within the cold chamber. "You steal the very foundation of Ma'at," the boss shrieked, its voice like the grinding of sand against stone. "You build your eternal life on my eternal death." Irie stood firm, his voice ringing with the stolen authority. "Silence! I am the new Ma'at. You are chaos. You seek to disrupt the continuity of the two lands. I place you where all chaos belongs, in the sealed dark." He slammed the granite Ka statue down onto a prepared pedestal in the center of the circle, where it resonated with a heavy final thud. The Ba, drawn irresistibly to its own essence, lunged for the statue. As the Bay touched the granite, Irie ignited the perimeter of the chalk circle with oil-soaked wicks. As the fire flared, the twisted pyramid texts carved into the walls of the cavern sprang to life, their hieroglyphs glowing with cold blue light. The light enveloped the Ba, which writhed in agony, unable to break the contact with its Ka, but simultaneously unable to escape the powerful binding spell. The Ba of Jedefre, the glorious soul of a great pharaoh, was successfully trapped, bound forever to the surface of the statue, endlessly orbiting the Ka it could never reclaim. Irie sealed the shaft with tons of rough quarry stone, covering his final, secret monument. He left the darkness to do its work. He had eliminated the last threat to his life. He returned to the royal court, the eternal architect, now certain of his immortality, the essence of kingship beating softly in his ib. He would watch the rise and fall of the dynasties, the theft of his own final Ka still decades away. The architect's harvest. The mortuary temple of Irie, circa 2160 BCE, the beginning of the first intermediate period. Centuries passed. The Old Kingdom collapsed into fragmented chaos. The central authority of the pharaoh dwindled, and the glorious monuments of Saqqara and Giza, were slowly overwhelmed by sand and neglect. This was the first intermediate period, a time of darkness and upheaval. But for Iri, it was a time of perverse triumph. Because of the stolen Ka, Iri, the eternal architect, lived through 5 centuries of Egyptian history. He watched the lines of true pharaohs wither and their mortuary cults dissolve. He became known as Iri Aten, Iri of the Sun, a legendary wise man who somehow never aged, offering counsel to weak nomarchs in Heracleopolis and Thebes. He was a silent, powerful continuity in a time of breakdown. But the Ka of Jedefre, however divine, was slowly running its course. The essence of a long-dead king was not an infinite spring, it was a vast reservoir. After 500 years, Iri began to feel the first subtle signs of decline. The divine clarity softened. The unnatural vigor waned. He needed to replenish his power. He used his accumulated wealth and influence to build his own mortuary complex, far south in the region of Abydos, where the cult of Osiris, the Lord of the Dead, was strongest. His complex was small, unassuming from the outside, but architecturally perfect in its internal symmetries, reflecting his divine understanding of construction. His great final act was to collect his harvest. Using his own perfected funerary rituals, Iri would identify wealthy, powerful local nobles, nomarchs, who had recently died. These men, dying with a strong, intact Ka, were his new targets. They were men of great worldly power, their life force robust, but their mortuary protection was weak in this time of chaos. He entered the nobles' tombs under the cloak of night, his face obscured by shadow. He performed the opening of the mouth ritual again, but this time, he refined his technique. He did not sever the Ka. He simply sipped from it, using a specialized ritual knife, a ceremonial pesishkef, made of silver and iron, which he had inscribed with powerful binding spells. He would draw a small amount of the foreign Ka into his own, recharging his essence. In the span of a single century, Iri sustained himself by stealing the vitality of a dozen powerful men, maintaining the fierce golden beat in his own heart. He was an immortal parasite, moving across the crumbling two lands, performing a continuous inverted Sed festival on the souls of the dead. But even this could not last forever. Iri was approaching the true finality of his long, unnatural life. The stolen Ka of Jedefre, though replenished by lesser souls, was finally exhausting its foundational energy. The architect knew that soon he would truly die. He retired to his completed tomb in Abydos. His final design was his own chamber, a room constructed entirely of basalt, in line with his own personal version of the pyramid text. Spells meant not to guide his soul, but to trap and preserve the complex, hybrid Ka he had created within himself. He wanted his stolen eternal kingship to be his epitaph. He lay on his basalt slab, his eyes open, the ancient black granite Ka statue, with the trapped Ba of Jedefre still shimmering faintly on its surface, resting on his chest, ensuring the final, complete transfer of the divine Ka back into his own failing body. He died peacefully, believing he had cheated eternity itself, leaving behind an empty tomb in Saqqara and a legacy of whispered fear across the ravaged two lands. The divine judgment, however, was still waiting. The weighing of the heart, the Hall of Two Truths, Duat, circa 2100 BCE. The scene is dominated by the colossal scale. 27 great Neteru gods sit in judgment. The floor is polished obsidian, reflecting the infinite starlight. At the center stands the Great Balance, supervised by Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of the scales. Iri, the eternal architect, now reduced to his ethereal form, stands naked before the tribunal. He is no longer the handsome, vigorous master builder, but a trembling shade carrying the terrible, concentrated weight of 5 centuries of stolen life force. His IB, heart-soul, placed on one pan of the Great Balance, is not the expected red granite of pure life, but a pulsating sphere of dark, golden light, corrupted and swollen by the Ka of Jedefre and the lesser life forces of the nomarchs. The counterweight on the opposing pan is the single perfect feather of Ma'at, representing truth, order, and justice. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe, stands ready with his palette and reed, his eyes ancient and unwavering. The air crackles with pure, objective judgment. The moment the scale settles, a shudder runs through the cosmos. Irie's heart, weighed down by the illicit ka of a god-king, is heavy. It tips the scale violently downward, slamming the pan against the obsidian floor, a sound like distant thunder echoing through the duat. The feather of Ma'at leaps into the air. The silence that follows is absolute. Irie, in his hubris, had believed the stolen ka would grant him passage. He was wrong. The power of a king does not negate the sin of theft. Osiris, enthroned in judgment, his body wrapped in the white linen of resurrection, speaks. His voice is deep, resonating with the waters of the annual flood. Irie the architect, your hands built monuments to eternal life, yet your heart constructed a temple of deceit. You consumed the ka of Jedafre and twisted the rites of the WPJR into a mortal trap. The weight of usurped divinity is the weight of great Isfet, chaos. Before Irie can plead, a great, hideous beast stirs at the foot of Osiris's throne. Emmet, the devourer of the dead, a terrifying amalgamation of crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus. Her gaze is fixed entirely upon the architect's pulsing, corrupted heart soul. Thoth lifts his palate and announces the verdict, his voice cold and precise. The heart of Irie is heavier than Ma'at. It is unfit for the field of reeds. It is forfeit. Irie lets out a silent spiritual scream of realization. He had achieved the ultimate power only to be denied the ultimate reward. But the final irony of his crime now manifests. The trapped Ba of Jedafre, which had ridden the black granite statue into the Duat and was still bound to the remnants of its ka within Irie's heart, suddenly breaks free from its spiritual shackles. With the heart destroyed, the binding spell is broken. The hawk-headed Ba, now truly free and restored by the divine environment of the Hall of Truths, lunges not at Amit, but at Irie's shade. It strikes Irie's Ak, glorified spirit, tearing away the last faint glimmer of Jedafre's golden ka that still clung to him. The Ba reclaims its own. In that instant, Irie becomes nothing. Stripped of the ka, the Ba, and the Ak, he is reduced to a meaningless flicker of consciousness. Amit, seeing the heart cleansed of the royal essence, but still bearing the taint of countless other souls, devours Irie's remaining ordinary heart soul in a single silent snap of her massive jaws. The eternal architect, who survived the opening of the mouth and stole a god-king's soul, became the first mortal devoured by Ammit in the Hall of Two Truths, erased completely from the cycle of rebirth. The balance resettles perfectly. Ma'at is restored.